From a secretive stint at an elite European boarding school to creating a veteran sanctuary on his homestead, Atz Kilcher's life is filled with shocking revelations that go far beyond Alaska's harsh wilderness. This rugged patriarch has battled hearing loss, family abuse cycles, and military trauma while hiding careers as a clinical social worker and basket weaver. Here are the 15 things you never knew about Atz Kilcher. Secret European education. While most fans know Atz Kilcher grew up on a remote Alaskan homestead without electricity or running water, what they don't know is that he spent 2 years of his teenage life attending an elite private boarding school somewhere in Europe. This shocking detail appears only as a brief reference in his 2018 memoir, Son of a Midnight Land, where he mentions it so casually that readers might miss it entirely. The fact that a kid from one of Alaska's most isolated homesteads ended up at a European boarding school in the 1960s is absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it. We're talking about a time when the Kilcher family was still hauling water, chopping wood for heat, and living by kerosene lamps. The nearest town of Homer was miles away down a dirt road, and yet somehow teenage Atz found himself in the sophisticated world of European private education. What makes this even more mysterious is how little Atz reveals about this experience. In a memoir that goes deep into his childhood trauma, his relationship with his abusive father, and his struggles with alcohol, he barely scratches the surface of what must have been a life-changing experience. Most boarding schools in Europe during that era were incredibly exclusive institutions that cost a fortune and catered to the children of diplomats, royalty, and wealthy industrialists. The timing would have been sometime in the early 1960s, when Atz was in his teens. This was decades before the family became famous, so it wasn't some publicity stunt or educational opportunity that came with television fame. Someone had to have serious money and connections to send a homestead kid from Alaska to study in Europe during that time period. What did he study there? How did his family afford it? Did his father Yule's political connections as an Alaska state senator play a role? These questions remain unanswered, making this one of the most intriguing mysteries about Atz Kilcher's past. Grandfather's language controversy. One of the most repeated facts about the Kilcher family patriarch Yule Kilcher is that he was a brilliant scholar who spoke 12 languages, but a close personal friend of his claims this number is wildly wrong, and that Yule actually spoke 47 languages and dialects. This creates a fascinating mystery about just how gifted this Swiss immigrant really was. Most official sources, including Wikipedia entries and family biographies, consistently state that Yule Kilcher spoke 12 languages. His granddaughter Jewel mentions in her autobiography that her grandfather was a brilliant scholar who spoke 8 languages, which adds even more confusion to the mix, since that's a completely different number from what most sources claim. However, according to a friend who knew Yule personally and posted about their relationship on social media, Yule himself told this friend directly that he spoke 47 languages and dialects. This friend described Yule as someone they knew well and had personal conversations with, making their testimony particularly interesting, since it comes from someone who actually spent time with the man himself. The difference between 12 languages and 47 is absolutely staggering and raises serious questions about which version is true. If Yule really did speak 47 languages and dialects, that would make him one of the most linguistically gifted people in modern history. Most polyglots, who are considered exceptional, speak somewhere between 10 and 20 languages fluently. Yule Kilcher was definitely an educated man who studied at universities in Berlin, Bern, Grenoble, and Aix-en-Provence before coming to Alaska. He worked as a journalist in multiple countries, including North Africa, Poland, the United States, and Scandinavia, which would have exposed him to many different languages. As a scholar who studied comparative philology, he would have had the academic background to master multiple languages. The truth about this family legend remains murky. And since Yule passed away in 1998, we may never know whether he was an impressive 12-language polyglot or a truly extraordinary 47-language linguistic genius. Clinical social worker career. Before Atz Kilcher became famous as the rugged patriarch on Alaska, the last frontier, he had a completely different career that most fans would never expect from watching him wrangle cattle and chop firewood on television. Atz actually earned a master's degree in social work from Brigham Young University and spent years working as a licensed clinical therapist, which creates a fascinating contrast with his tough homesteader image. After returning from his service in Vietnam, Atz didn't just go straight back to homestead life like many viewers might assume. Instead, he pursued higher education and became deeply involved in helping people through some of their most difficult moments. He worked extensively with troubled teenagers who had serious social and emotional issues, many of whom had been incarcerated for serious offenses and were part of the corrections system. His clinical work also extended into marriage and family therapy, where he helped couples and families work through their relationship problems and communication issues. Atz spent considerable time collaborating with probation officers, social workers, foster homes, institutions, judges, and courts as part of his professional responsibilities. He describes this period of his life as being in the people business and says he was always focused on trying to make a positive difference in people's lives and help them get to a better place. What makes this career even more interesting is that Atz was motivated to become a therapist partly because of his own traumatic experiences. He dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder from both his dysfunctional family upbringing and his combat experiences in Vietnam, which gave him deep empathy for anyone dealing with trauma of any kind. He spent years studying different therapeutic approaches and trying to figure out which methods were most effective for helping people change and heal. Atz has mentioned that although he worked as a therapist for many years and went through extensive therapy himself, he found that talking with other veterans and sharing experiences with people who had similar struggles was often the most helpful part of his own healing journey. Mormon conversion mystery. Despite being one of the most well-documented reality television families in America, Atz Kilcher keeps one major chapter of his life almost completely hidden from his public story, and that's his conversion to the Mormon faith and his time as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This religious period was significant enough that it led him to attend Brigham Young University in Utah, yet he barely acknowledges it in interviews, his memoir, or on the show. The conversion apparently happened sometime after his return from Vietnam, when Atz was dealing with the trauma of war and trying to figure out his path in life. Brigham Young University is the flagship educational institution of the Mormon Church, located in Provo, Utah, and it's where Atz earned his bachelor's degree in psychology before going on to get his master's degree in social work from the same university. What makes this particularly interesting is that Atz was already married to his first wife, Lenadra Carroll, during this time, and their daughter Jewel was actually born in Payson, Utah, in 1974. While the family was living there during Atz's university years, this means that some of the most formative years of the Kilcher family's life happened not on the Alaskan homestead, but in the heart of Mormon country. The fact that Atz keeps this religious chapter so quiet is puzzling, especially since he's otherwise been very open about difficult and personal aspects of his life, including his struggles with alcohol, his abusive childhood, and his own admission of being abusive to his children. His memoir goes into great detail about his psychological journey and his various therapeutic experiences, but the Mormon period gets barely a mention. Even his daughter Jewel has noted that the family stopped attending church after her parents divorced when she was 8 years old, suggesting that the Mormon faith was a significant part of their family life for at least several years. The reasons behind Atz's decision to keep this part of his story largely private remain unclear. Basket weaving artist. While viewers of Alaska, the Last Frontier, see Atz Kilcher as a tough cowboy who hunts, fishes, and wrangles cattle. Then what they don't see is his surprisingly delicate artistic side as an accomplished basket weaver, who creates pieces that have been displayed in art exhibitions. This gentle craft represents a completely different aspect of his personality that contrasts sharply with his rugged television image. Atz spends much of his summer time at what he calls the head of the bay, which is a remote location at Kachemak Bay, where he goes to find peace and solitude away from the main homestead. During these quiet months, he engages in basket weaving as both a meditative practice and a serious artistic pursuit. The head of the bay provides him with shelter, water, and salmon, allowing him to remain completely disconnected from the outside world while he focuses on his craft. According to Discovery Channel's official biography of Atz, he uses this time not just for basket weaving, but also to watch over cattle, play music, and stockpile supplies for the harsh Alaskan winter. The basket weaving fits perfectly into this slower, more contemplative lifestyle that exists away from the cameras and the pressures of television production. His baskets aren't just casual hobby projects either. Atz has created pieces that are sophisticated enough to be featured in actual art exhibitions, suggesting a level of skill and artistry that takes years to develop. The fact that his handmade baskets have been included in gallery showings indicates that the art world recognizes his work as legitimate artistic expression, not just rustic crafts. This artistic pursuit connects Atz to traditional skills that were essential for survival in earlier times, when baskets were used for gathering, storing, and transporting everything from berries to tools. By continuing this ancient practice, he's not only creating beautiful art, but also preserving cultural knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The patience and attention to detail required for basket weaving also provides a stark contrast to the high-energy, problem-solving activities that dominate his television appearances. Hearing loss threatens music. One of the most heartbreaking challenges facing Atz Kilcher is his gradual hearing loss, which threatens to end his lifelong career as a musician and performer, forcing him to consider giving up guitar performances that have been central to his identity for decades. This devastating condition has already begun affecting his ability to perform with his guitar, and he's openly admitted that he may need to completely change how he shares his music with the world. Music has been absolutely essential to Atz's life since childhood, when the Kilcher family entertained themselves with songs, stories, and performances during long Alaskan winters without electricity or modern conveniences. He became famous throughout Alaska as a cowboy poet and singer-songwriter known for his folk, bluegrass, and Western music, as well as his expert yodeling skills that he passed down to his daughter, Jewel. The hearing loss is particularly cruel because it strikes at the very heart of what Atz loves most about performing. He's written extensively about his experiences with fellow veterans at healing retreats, where he's had to confront the reality that his hearing problems are getting worse and that traditional guitar performances may no longer be possible for him. In his own words, he's described worrying that he might fall way short of the mark, or that people might think he's no longer able to do his job as a performer. Rather than give up entirely, Atz has been exploring alternative ways to continue sharing his artistic gifts. He's considering switching to singing a cappella, which would eliminate the need to hear guitar accompaniment, or focusing entirely on storytelling and poetry readings, where his hearing loss wouldn't interfere with his ability to connect with audiences. This transition represents a major life change for someone who has spent decades touring Alaska with his guitar and performing alongside his famous daughter. The fact that he's approaching this challenge with determination rather than despair shows the same resilience that has helped him survive everything from combat in Vietnam to harsh Alaskan winters on the homestead. Founded Veteran Healing Nonprofit. Instead of just using his television fame for personal gain, Atz Kilcher has turned his platform into a powerful force for veteran advocacy by founding Heroes Healing Homestead, a nonprofit sanctuary located right on his family's property in Alaska that provides transformative healing experiences for military veterans struggling with trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. This organization represents a deeply personal mission that goes far beyond anything viewers see on Alaska, the Last Frontier. The nonprofit operates as a wilderness therapy retreat, where veterans can find healing through connection with nature, music, storytelling, and camaraderie with other veterans who understand their experiences. Atz draws on his own combat experience in Vietnam from 1967 to 1968, as well as his background as a licensed clinical therapist, to create programs specifically designed to help veterans process their trauma in a supportive environment. Heroes Healing Homestead has already hosted multiple groups of veterans, including 11 veterans from Minnesota who spent several days at the Kilcher Homestead and in the Kachemak Bay Wilderness in October of 2020. The program includes camping on the homestead, wilderness hiking, campfire storytelling sessions, where Atz performs music and shares his own experiences, and opportunities for veterans to connect with each other in ways that traditional therapy often can't provide. The organization has partnered with other veteran support groups and has even hosted special events like Heroes Healing, Songs from the Wilderness, a benefit concert that featured Atz performing alongside other veteran musicians. The events raise money to provide more veterans with the opportunity to experience the healing power of Alaska's wilderness completely free of charge. What makes this nonprofit particularly meaningful is that it fulfills a long-held dream of Atz's parents, Yule and Ruth Kilcher, who always envisioned their homestead as a place of transformation, healing, and community. Atz has said that when he works with veterans on the land his father loved, he can't help but think about how something positive is happening with that land, carrying forward his family's original vision in a completely new way. Abusive father's dark legacy. While the Kilcher family has been celebrated on television as pioneers who built an idyllic homestead life in Alaska, Atz Kilcher's 2018 memoir, Son of a Midnight Land, reveals a much darker reality about his childhood, exposing his father Yule as what Atz describes as a mean tyrant who subjected his family to years of explosive anger, psychological cruelty, and physical violence. This shocking revelation completely changes how fans understand the family's early years on the homestead. The memoir doesn't romanticize homestead life at all, instead painting a picture of a household ruled by fear and unpredictable rage. Atz describes growing up under constant threat of his father's violent outbursts, never knowing what might trigger Yule's anger or how severe the consequences might be. The psychological damage from this treatment was so severe that Atz learned to lie as a survival mechanism, trying desperately to please his volatile father and avoid punishment. What makes this abuse particularly tragic is that it happened to someone who was already dealing with the enormous pressures of pioneer life in one of the world's harshest environments. Yule Kilcher was responsible for keeping his family alive through brutal Alaskan winters without modern conveniences. But instead of being a protective father, he became the primary source of danger and fear for his children. Atz writes extensively about how his father's treatment included not just physical violence, but constant belittling and humiliation that left lasting emotional scars. As the oldest son, Atz felt responsible for protecting his mother and younger siblings from Yule's rage, which put him in an impossible position where he was both victim and attempted protector. The memoir reveals that this abuse had far-reaching consequences that affected multiple generations of the Kilcher family. Atz admits that the trauma from his father's treatment, combined with his experiences in Vietnam, led to his own struggles with alcohol and eventually to his own abusive behavior toward his children, creating a cycle of violence that took tremendous effort and professional therapy to break. Admitted child abuser. In one of the most shocking and courageous admissions in his memoir, Atz Kilcher openly confesses that he perpetuated the cycle of abuse he experienced as a child acknowledging that he became abusive toward his own children and used alcohol as a way to self-medicate his trauma before finally seeking professional help and achieving sobriety. This brutal honesty about his failures as a father makes his memoir one of the most unflinching accounts of generational trauma ever written by a reality television star. Atz describes himself during this period as a self-medicating screw-up who made terrible decisions that hurt the people he loved most. The combination of trauma from his abusive childhood and his experiences as a combat veteran in Vietnam created a perfect storm of psychological damage that he initially tried to handle through drinking rather than proper therapy or treatment. The memoir reveals that his behavior became so destructive that it drove his family apart, with his first wife, Lenedra, eventually taking their children and leaving him. This wasn't just a case of a difficult divorce, but a situation where a mother felt she had to protect her children from their own father's harmful behavior. What makes this confession particularly powerful is that Atz doesn't make excuses for his actions or try to minimize the damage he caused. He takes full responsibility for his choices and acknowledges that his children suffered because of his inability to break the cycle of abuse that had been passed down to him from his own father. The motivation behind writing the memoir was largely to serve as a public apology to his now adult children, and remarkably, both Jewel and Atz Lee wrote endorsements for the book that appear on its cover. His children have thanked him for doing the difficult work of examining his past behavior and asking for forgiveness, suggesting that his efforts to change and make amends have been genuine and effective. Atz credits years of professional therapy, personal reflection, and achieving sobriety with helping him transform from an abusive father into someone capable of healthy relationships with his children and grandchildren. Secret Alaska's Von Trapp family. Long before Alaska, the last frontier made them famous. The Kilcher family was already well known throughout Alaska, and even parts of Europe, as a musical performing family that people compared to the Von Trapp family from The Sound of Music, with all 8 children singing and playing instruments together in professional shows during the 1950s and 1960s. This fascinating chapter of their history reveals that the Kilchers were entertainers and performers decades before reality television discovered them. The comparison to the Von Trapp family wasn't just casual, then it was a deliberate parallel that people drew because both families were large musical groups, led by parents who had fled Europe during wartime, and both families featured multiple children who could sing and play instruments with professional-level skill. Just like the Von Trapps, the Kilcher family performed as a cohesive unit, with carefully arranged harmonies and choreographed presentations. What makes this even more remarkable is that they weren't just performing locally in Alaska, but actually toured internationally, taking their act to Europe, where they performed for audiences who appreciated their unique blend of American folk music and traditional European influences. This international touring happened during an era when travel between Alaska and Europe was much more difficult and expensive than it is today, suggesting that the family was successful enough to justify the enormous costs of such ambitious trips. The performances weren't casual family sing-alongs either. These were professional shows where the family earned money and built a reputation as serious entertainers. All 8 Kilcher children participated in these musical performances, creating a sound that was both powerful and distinctive because of the sheer number of voices and instruments they could bring to any song. This musical foundation explains why so many members of the Kilcher family have continued to pursue music throughout their lives, from Atz's career as a cowboy poet and yodeler to his daughter Jewel's international success as a Grammy-nominated recording artist. The performance skills and musical confidence they developed during these early touring years clearly shaped their approach to entertainment for generations to come. Mother's opera singer background. The incredible sacrifice that Ruth Kilcher made to become an Alaskan homesteader becomes clear when you learn that she gave up a sophisticated European life filled with operas, classical singing training, violin lessons, and education at the finest private schools to live in a tiny log cabin without electricity or running water, while raising 8 children in the Alaska wilderness. This dramatic lifestyle change represents one of the most extreme transformations from luxury to survival living in American pioneer history. Ruth had been trained as a classical singer with serious operatic aspirations, and she possessed the kind of refined cultural background that would have made her perfectly suited for a career in European high society or the performing arts. Her early life was steeped in the finest aspects of European culture, including access to world-class music education and exposure to the greatest opera houses and concert halls of the time. When she made the decision to join Atz Kilcher in Alaska, she wasn't just moving to a different country. She was completely abandoning a way of life that revolved around art, music, and intellectual pursuits to embrace an existence focused entirely on basic survival. The contrast couldn't have been more extreme, going from attending operas in elegant European theaters to hauling water from a well and chopping wood to keep her family warm through brutal Alaskan winters. Despite this enormous change, Ruth managed to put her classical training to good use by becoming one of Alaska's first female journalists, writing a column about homesteading for an Anchorage daily newspaper. This work allowed her to use her education and writing skills while also documenting the unique challenges and experiences of pioneer life for readers who had never experienced such hardships. Ruth also became the primary educator for all 8 Kilcher children, homeschooling them until they reached their teenage years, because the nearest school was too far away for them to attend. Her classical music background clearly influenced the family's strong musical traditions, as she taught her children to appreciate and perform music even in their remote wilderness setting, creating the foundation for their later success as professional performers. Chronic liar admission. In one of the most brutally honest self-assessments ever made by a reality television star, Atz Kilcher describes his younger self as both a homestead hick and a chronic liar, who developed these destructive habits as survival mechanisms to cope with his father's unpredictable and violent behavior. This shocking admission reveals that the man viewers see as an honest, straightforward patriarch on Alaska, the last frontier, was actually someone who struggled with dishonesty for much of his early life. According to his memoir, Atz learned to lie as a desperate attempt to please his volatile father and avoid the explosive anger that could erupt at any moment in the Kilcher household. Living under the constant threat of his father's rage, young Atz discovered that telling his father what he wanted to hear, regardless of whether it was true, was often the only way to prevent violent outbursts or psychological attacks. The lying wasn't limited to interactions with his abusive father, the Dalaron. It became a pattern that affected other relationships in his life as well. Atz admits that during his youth, he also stole from his friends, showing that the dysfunction in his home life had corrupted his ability to maintain honest relationships with anyone, even people who cared about him and trusted him. What makes this confession particularly striking is how Atz refers to himself as a homestead hick, suggesting that he felt inferior and unsophisticated compared to other people, which may have contributed to his need to create false stories about himself or his circumstances. The isolation of homestead life, combined with the trauma of an abusive household, apparently created a young person who felt he had to lie to be accepted or to protect himself from further harm. This pattern of dishonesty clearly haunted Atz for years, as he describes it as one of the behaviors he had to work hard to overcome through therapy and personal reflection. The fact that he's willing to admit these character flaws so openly in his memoir suggests that confronting his past dishonesty was an important part of his journey toward becoming the person he is today. 6 Hidden Sisters. While Alaska, the last frontier, focuses almost exclusively on brothers Atz and Otto Kilcher and their families, most fans have no idea that the Kilcher family actually includes 6 sisters who deliberately stay off the show but continue to live on or near the homestead, creating their own successful businesses and artistic careers away from the television cameras. This means that the family viewers see on television represents only a small fraction of the actual Kilcher clan. The 6 sisters are named Ortilla Hepp, Faye Graham, Atz Kilcher, Burton, Stella Vera Kilcher, Mossy Kilcher, and Sunrise Schoberg, and they've all chosen to maintain much more private lives than their famous brothers. Despite staying out of the spotlight, several of these women have built impressive careers and businesses that contribute significantly to the homestead community. Sister Mossy Kilcher has become particularly successful as both a folk musician and an entrepreneur, producing her own folk albums that showcase the musical talents that run throughout the entire Kilcher family. Beyond her recording career, Mossy also operates seaside farms right on the homestead property, where visitors can pick raspberries during early fall harvest season and experience authentic homestead agriculture. Mossy has also expanded her business to include tourism, offering overnight accommodations in cabins, campsites, and even a youth hostel for travelers who want to experience homestead life firsthand. This allows people to stay on the actual Kilcher property and get a taste of the lifestyle that made the family famous, but without the television cameras rolling. The youngest sister, Katkin, has followed a similar path by renting out her own cabin on the homestead to travelers, creating another way for visitors to connect with the Kilcher legacy while supporting the family's continued presence on the land. Stella Vera Kilcher has also been involved in offering workshops and educational experiences, including transcendental meditation and yoga sessions for visitors. The fact that 6 accomplished women choose to remain largely invisible while their brothers become television stars raises interesting questions about privacy, family dynamics, and the different ways people can contribute to preserving homestead traditions without seeking public attention. Helicopter hunting. In 2015, Atz Kilcher, his wife Jane, and a production company involved in Alaska. The Last Frontier were all charged with serious hunting violations after they were caught using a helicopter as part of a bear hunt while filming an episode in 2014, breaking Alaska state laws that strictly prohibit using aircraft for hunting purposes. This scandal revealed that the supposedly authentic wilderness lifestyle shown on the program had crossed the line into illegal territory. Alaska has very specific and Yengoda laws about hunting, and using any aircraft to spot prey or using a helicopter in any way as part of a hunt is completely illegal throughout the state. These laws exist to ensure fair chase principles and to prevent hunters from having unfair advantages over wildlife, but the Kilcher family and the production crew apparently either didn't know about these regulations or chose to ignore them while filming. The violation came to light when a former member of the production company tipped off Alaska state troopers about what had happened during the filming of the bear hunting episode. This insider information led to an official investigation that resulted in criminal charges being filed against both family members and the production company responsible for the show. Atz Lee, Jane, and the production company Wilma Television Incorporated, which is a subsidiary of Discovery Channel, all initially pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, the legal proceedings were complicated when Atz Lee was seriously injured in a hiking accident that left him with multiple broken bones and punctured lungs, putting the court case on hold while he recovered from his life-threatening injuries. Eventually, the case was resolved with very different outcomes for the different parties involved. While the production company Wilma Television was forced to pay a significant fine of $17,500 for their role in the illegal hunting, the charges against Atz Lee and Jane Kilcher themselves were completely dismissed. This suggests that the legal system viewed the production company as more responsible for the violation than the individual family members who participated in the hunt. Reality show. Fakeness. Despite presenting itself as an authentic documentary about a family living off the land in Alaska, Behind the scenes, reports reveal that Alaska, the last frontier, is actually pretty fake, according to industry insiders, with producers deliberately creating artificial situations and scenarios that the family then has to act out for the cameras rather than simply filming their genuine daily activities. This means that much of what viewers see as spontaneous homestead life is actually carefully orchestrated television drama. The show doesn't operate like a traditional scripted program where actors memorize lines and follow a detailed script, but it also isn't the unscripted documentary that many fans believe they're watching. Instead, the production team uses a method that's common in reality television, where producers establish specific situations that need to happen and then film the family members as they work through these predetermined scenarios. This approach allows the show to maintain the appearance of authenticity while ensuring that each episode has enough dramatic content and interesting challenges to keep viewers engaged. Rather than waiting around for genuinely dramatic moments to occur naturally in the family's daily routine, which might take weeks or months to happen, the producers can create the kind of compelling television that needs to air on a regular schedule. The artificial nature of many situations helps explain why the family always seems to face life or death circumstances and major crises in every single episode, when real homestead life would typically involve long periods of routine work punctuated by occasional genuine emergencies. The constant drama and high-stakes scenarios that appear on screen are designed to maintain viewer interest rather than accurately represent what daily life on the homestead actually looks like. This revelation puts Atz Kilcher's television contract in a new light, since it likely contains strict requirements about not revealing the behind-the-scenes production methods or discussing how much of the show is staged versus authentic. The fact that reality shows have been using these fabricated scenario techniques for years means that Alaska, the last frontier, is following standard industry practices rather than breaking new ground in deceptive television production.